Welcome to the How Round Is Your Roti podcast. I'm Priya, and this podcast aims to discuss topics that impact and support South Asian women. Today, I have with me Sonia Gupta, who is a relationship and divorce mentor and coach. Sonia became famous for having a divorce party when her divorce was finalized. So, hi, Sonia.
Hi, Priya. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Great to have you on the podcast. So, as we well know, in South Asian communities, divorce is not something that is widely spoken about, encouraged, often discouraged, even in bad relationships. It's just carry on, carry on. So this was like a really interesting story when I heard it, and I really wanted to meet you. But please share your divorce story and why it was important to you to have a party to celebrate it.
So I will fill you in on all that in a minute. But what I wanted to say to you, I love the name of your podcast, How Round Is Your Roti? And the irony in my story is my roti's one round. And my mum blamed the fact that I didn't make roti properly for the marriage failing. So
Oh,
it's
good.
quite interesting that it's called How Round Is Your Roti, because I'd be like, yeah, wait, they weren't round and I didn't make them enough. And I say to my mum as a joke, which she doesn't find very funny, she has a roti magic machine. The ones that make automatic roti. And I say to people, maybe if I had a roti my marriage might have survived. But obviously that isn't enough of a reason for a marriage to fail. But I think it played a part in it. But yeah, I loved the name of it. So
Thank you.
that's all right. So back to my journey. So I got married in 2003. But I got married in India. I went back to India to get married. And the plan was to stay there, live there. I quite like living in India. I quite like the life there. I'd really enjoyed it. But we didn't end up staying there. We came back to the UK in 2005. So long, it's a really long story, but I'll give the overview of it. So we came back here in 2005. And I think life is just difficult, right? I got married, had a child, moved country twice in the space of 3 years. So I didn't even find my footing in any of those arenas. So one, I'd moved to India. Then I got married in India. Then I had a child. Then I came back to the UK. So that's a lot in 3 years to move country twice, find your footing, get married, have a child. So when I look back at it now, I kind of think that was a lot for me to adapt to and for him, because I've done a lot of work on this whole journey now. And I feel like things could have maybe been done differently, right? So when I came to the UK, and for lots of different reasons, the marriage just wasn't where I wanted it to be. Like there was, the normal everyday drama. There was other things. I don't really go into that. And in 2010, I was pregnant with my second son. And I realized the marriage definitely wasn't where it should be. And, the expectations you have from a marriage. And so I spoke to my parents straight away and I said, look, I need out of this situation. And they were like, no, you're pregnant with your second child. How are you going to do it by yourself? Blah, blah, blah. This happens all the time. You basically make it work. And
Yeah.
at that point, I was like, yeah, I didn't have a choice because he worked for my family. I was on mat leave. Yeah, it's really complicated financially. And basically, this is where the point was, mum was like, maybe you should stay home and make roti. And I was like, so I actually didn't go back to my career after having my second child. I joined the family business under the theme that it may save the marriage because, that's what you need to do. Stay home, be a good wife, make the round roti and carry on. It didn't work, right? 2010, okay, thought, okay, fine. 2012, still trying. And basically, as the years progressed, I kind of realized that this is progressively getting worse. It's not getting any better. The dynamics are getting worse. There's more tension. And I'm not saying it's not one-sided, because obviously if one person is unhappy, then the other one is unhappy. So I'm not going to put blame in particular on one person. I think there were certain things that happened to put me in that situation, but afterwards it takes two, right? And the boys have a really good relationship with their dad now. So I don't want to change the dynamics of that. And I'm very aware of that. So 2010 to 2017, though, was when I battled my family. And I mean battle, war.
And is that your
My
parents?
parents, my parents. I
Right.
mean, his family were in India and they'd come and visit and stay with us, which obviously made the dynamics even hard. So everywhere I went, my mum and dad were on his side, his parents were obviously on his side. So it was always like 3 against 1, at some points 6 against 1. It was, yeah, five against 1. So it's quite difficult, right? So just trying to do the maths. Um, but if people say to me, what was your hardest battle? It was my mum and dad. Um, And I'd come home from work some days because I joined the family business. And then in 2015 realized whilst I was in the family business, I was never going to be free because they had this full financial control over me and him, right? So I was like, well, I really need out. I want out. So I left and went back to my career and I started rebuilding my career. So some days I'd come home from work and they'd be sitting on the sofa in my house, like my mum and dad and him, to lecture me about things that I hadn't done properly or hadn't be things like you didn't iron that shirt properly, you didn't clean the kitchen just and I'd be like, this is just
Yeah.
um
Does this just reminds me of how no matter what happens, women tend to get the blame.
yeah, I was always to blame. And a lot of those emotions, and I've penned them actually in a book that's coming out in end of March, beginning of April. And the title of that book is actually Tune Neend Kharab Kar Di, which means to people that may not understand Hindi, is it literally means you disturb my sleep. But actually, I've used it as in you're disturbing the peace, you're disturbing the calm. So when I tell people the tone, they always think it's going to be all about the ex, and it's not. It's about the cultural pressure I had on me to keep quiet. So in theory, if I just kept my mouth shut and just carried on, I wouldn't have disturbed the peace. I wouldn't have disturbed the balance. So it, I've written a lot about the guilt I felt, trying to extricate myself, what I put my parents through, because I definitely ruined their sleep. I mean, I didn't sleep, but I definitely ruined theirs as well, because obviously they're parents, they care, right? So we had this journey till 2017. I was battling mum and dad. And then 2017, my mum and dad and my ex had some disagreements over business. And so my parents were like, okay, then let's get you divorced now. And I'm like, I've been banging on for 7 years, which hurts. And I say it now and I laugh about it but at that time I was like, I've been in this space for 7 years and now all of a sudden it's okay. And then I went through the whole process of court, 3 years at court, not over child custody, over financials. There was never custody issues because I'm very much against the fact that children are kept away from their parents. I don't agree with that at all. So children wise, we managed to make it work, even though there was a lot of tension. And then 3 years of court in COVID, living together the whole time. Yeah. So we were in the four walls and court would be online at that time. So I'd go to my mum and dad's and log in there. He would, I think, probably do it from here. I don't even know. And I lost every case until my final hearing. And I
Gosh.
had to walk back through that front door into that environment. And there aren't really words that describe that feeling that of the anxiety, the stress. I'm disturbing the balance. I'm disturbing, it was really, really difficult. However, in 2021, I got divorced and I threw my divorce party in September 2021. And that's where things changed for me. That is where it all changed.
Okay, so it sounds like, yeah, you went through such a tough time. I can't imagine having to have those court proceedings and then face that situation, coming back home and having to face it with the other party right there, right in front of you, knowing everything that's happening around you. So I suppose knowing that divorce was something you wanted for so many years and then finally getting what you wanted at the end was the reason for having the party and celebrating it. You know, did you feel throughout that process, I'm just curious to know that, were you waiting for permission from your parents? Because you said once they were on board, then you felt like you could go for it. Was that a barrier for you?
So it financially initially was a barrier because I was working for them. So when I left working for them, which I think was 2014, 15, around that time, I was still only working part-time, like because of the kids. So financially, there was a big barrier of how I was going to extricate myself from the situation. And because he worked for them as well, while that was the situation, it was really difficult. I didn't want their permission because I was still battling them, right? I was going to do it no matter. That's why I left the family business, because I'd realized that I was never going to be able to get out while still they were financially controlling me, right? Because it was in their control. But I didn't want permission, but I needed them on board because financially we were all so tied in together. And I think that's what the problem was. If financially we weren't all so tied in together, I probably would have just tried to just go through the, file for divorce. But there was part of me that wanted them on board to understand. And they came round to the idea of getting divorced. But my mum still says to me now, did you do the right thing? And I'm like, oh my days, Mum, seriously? She still says to me, and I'm like, how can you even ask me that? And I'm like, and not only I'm so much happier, I'm sure he's happier, right? Because two people can't be living together and one be really miserable and the other one be happy and okay. We were both miserable, and so were the kids. And the other thing that I noticed in the period that I was going through this, I wasn't the best version as a mum. How can you be an effective mum? Obviously, I was a mum and I did what I had to do. But for 12 years, I'm not joking, I cried every day in that car. I dropped the kids to school or nursery or wherever they're going. And that journey to wherever I was going, whether it's mum and dad's work or when I left and my work, all I did was cry. And so, like, physically I was here, but emotionally I was not present at all.
Yeah.
And I feel like
Yeah.
I missed so much of my kids' childhood because of it. And that hurts. But I'm here and we're in a much better place, like all of us. So for me, that's really important. But that's the question, did I want their permission? I didn't want their permission, but I wanted them to understand. Like, I would have done it anyway. But I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to be on board with what I was doing. I didn't want them to be like, you're just going against the grain. I wanted them to,
Yeah. I think as parents, that's what we want from our parents. They don't necessarily have to agree with everything you're doing, but I think we want their support. But I think something like this, whether you have it or not, like you said, you were going to go through with it anyway because you knew it was what you needed. So since you had that divorce party, you said everything's changed for you. And I think it's great that you talk about this openly, especially with South Asian women, where traditionally it hasn't been spoken about, allowed in, larger platforms. Like, you've been in the papers about it. You've written a book. I know that you're very proud of having your journey of moving forward with your life, getting out of the situation that you weren't happy in, where lots of other South Asian women are told, what you were told and stuck with it. Just be quiet, get on with it. Things will get better. We're often not given that support that we're craving, and some women question themselves over and over again.
Yeah.
So what has the response been to you since you celebrated your divorce, since you've become, a different person?
So I've had a lot of support from a lot of women. So what happened was there was no plan to have this party go viral, right? There was no like, yeah, this is going to happen. It's going to change my life. I'm not joking. It was August and my birthday's in July. So I kept saying to my son, I want to have a party because I'm quite a social person, as you can probably tell. And my birthday's in July and Independence Day's in. So there was a bit of a theme going on. I said, oh, let's have a party on Independence Day. Not that I'm American, but the COVID rules were like, you have 20, 30 people. I was like, well, that's not going to work. So we scrapped the idea. Then it was like August, literally sitting on the sofa behind me here. And I said to my son, God, I really want to have a party. I just want everybody round just to celebrate a new beginning. I messaged my core girls, you've got your core girls like that have to be present. I'm like, are you free on this date? It was like 3 weeks time. They were like, yeah. I said, okay, just save the date. I put this party together in 3 weeks. It was obviously pink themed. There was a unicorn cake, a unicorn bouncy castle, because it was actually for friends and family and kids. It was like for everybody, because what had happened is the whole 12 years we were going through this divorce, children's friends didn't really come over. There was no play dates and stuff. I wanted them to also know there was a massive new beginning. And so I threw this party, had a fabulous time. somebody that I'm a really good friend with runs Asian Single Parents Network. So she put it on her social media, and a journalist got in touch with her, said, "We want to speak to Sonia." But I'm not joking. She spoke to me for 40 minutes, like a couple of days later. I'm like, didn't think anything of it. I'm merrily in the office working away, and my friend pings me a screenshot. And he went, "You're in the mirror." And I went, "What?" Yeah, I mean, the journalist herself didn't tell me, right? And I was like, "What?" He goes, "You're in the mirror." Anyway, so that was great. And it just said on that headline, "Woman throws herself a divorce party." So that was fine. My parents weren't impressed, but they kind of just left it. But then it went global. And then it went to India. And the title there was "Indian Woman Throws Divorce Party." And obviously that changes the way anyone perceives anything. So then the family from India ringing is all kicking off. My nephews are saying, "Boy, you're trending on notifications." And my mum and dad were like, "You got divorced. You didn't need to tell the whole world." And I was like, "I didn't plan this. This was not the plan. I just threw it party in my back garden." It was not like, oh, it was fairly, I wouldn't say it was lavish, but there was lots of quirky things going on, like bouncy castles and candy floss and all that kind of stuff. But there was no intention of this happening. And that is when I realized that I had a story to tell, and it helped others. Because then I started getting messages from women and men from all over. "Your story is really inspiring. Thank you for sharing." And I was like, and that just changed the trajectory for everything for me, because otherwise I'd probably been just another number of another divorced woman, right? And I think people saw the fact that a lot of people that go through divorce will talk about maybe their in-laws or their ex-husband and stuff like that. But yes, there was that dynamic as well. But my biggest problem in my journey was actually my own mum and dad, which happens a lot, but people are too scared to talk about it. And I think that's why my story is potentially a little bit different to everybody else's, because my mum knows, and she knows she was my biggest hurdle, and she says it openly. And we talk, we've healed, and there's no animosity. And actually, mum and dad are the ones that actually helped me out in the end to get out the situation. They were on board. I wouldn't say fully on board, emotionally fully on board. They weren't fully on board emotionally, because there's still the question, but they were there. In the end, they had my back, right? But it was that journey of getting them on board, which was the hardest bit, which is what I talk about.
Yeah. And you said after that party and after it became international, lots of women were reaching out to you. So what were they saying? Why were they reaching out? Because, usually I do imagine back in the day, if it was divorce, it's very undercover. You keep it quiet. There are probably feelings of shame and guilt there, but you didn't show any of that. So with the women reaching out to you, what did they want to know, or what issues were they coming to you
So
with?
some of them were just saying, "Your story is really inspiring." And that was it. Some were saying, like, "How do I navigate the situation?" So they're asking me advice. And then I had one woman reach out to me, and she just said, she doesn't know me, she said, "I felt compelled to find you. I just want to say thank you to you for my daughters, because you've made it out there to say it's okay to speak up. And basically, you don't need to put up with something that doesn't serve you. You can celebrate, and you can walk away from situations that don't serve you," which is, I think that's the problem, is that a lot of women stay because, one, the cultural pressure. I think that is, apart from finances, the other big problem is what people are going to say, what people are going to think. I've spoken to women, financially, it's not a problem for them to walk away from their marriages. They've got the money, they can do it. But they're like, "But I don't want to be in society as a single woman." And I'm like, but that's just crazy. Like, why would you stay in a relationship that makes you so unhappy? For me, that just doesn't make sense. Because I'd rather be, I'm not saying I'm lonely, but lonely and happy than lonely in a horrible situation. Do you see what I mean? And I'm not, yes, that companionship is obviously nice. And I'm not saying I wouldn't consider it again, but it's also not the most important thing. Like, for me, happiness is more important. And when I made that choice when I was leaving my marriage, I had a choice. For me, it was between money and happiness, because I had a very comfortable lifestyle working for mum and dad. I didn't work 40 hours a week. I would just work like whatever I wanted to do. And I chose my inner peace and happiness over financial. And a lot of people think, well, how did you do that? And what? Because I was so unhappy. And the kids, like all of us, I think you've got to decide what is more important to you. But I think when there's kids involved, a toxic, either you make it work and it's not toxic, but if it's toxic, it's not healthy for the children.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned so many different pressures there. And you're right, the cultural pressure, the financial pressure, the fact that marriage, and I write about this quite a lot on the Substack, that marriage is put on such a pedestal for young girls. And it's, "Well, when you get married, when you're older, you're going to get married." And it's just like, it's the everything. So when marriages don't work out, people are in denial about it, or families are like, "We've given you everything." And then the marriages sometimes are so lavish as well. I mean, Indian families,
Mine
big fat
was
Indian wedding.
huge, huge.
And then there's guilt, extra guilt associated from that as well. I think there's so many different things to contend with. It can seem like such a barrier when you want to end it. And it's almost like, as a woman, you've got to untangle yourself from all of that. Like I said, really get to your core of what is important to you. How do you want to live your life? Yeah, imagine it's really difficult to think about that and try and find a way forward that is right for you, but also right if you have kids, right for your partner, right for your family. I just think we tend to take on a lot more around us.
And that's exactly what I've written about in my book, the expectations of women, that we are expected to basically suppress our emotions for the peace of everybody else, for the sake of everybody else. And it's funny you said about the wedding. My wedding was huge. I had 2,000 people at my wedding. I was in India.
Wow. 2000.
Huge. Yeah. So there was that. My parents paid a huge amount for my wedding. My friends all flew from the UK. They had 6 weeks notice from the day I met my ex-husband to the day I got married. So everyone flew out. We came to the UK and my parents helped us out with the deposit for the house. So there is so many financial situations, and the guilt from that is huge. And I think that's the bit that I really struggled with, which is why you said, did you want their permission? I just wanted them to understand, because they had done so much for me and for us as a family. But I wanted them also to understand that the marriage wasn't what a marriage should be. I was unhappy. And for me, what you said about that social conditioning, about the pressure to get married. So I didn't have pressure to get married. I wanted to get married, but I feel like I wanted to get married because I was told getting married was the end goal. And so I think what I want to now tell people, marriage isn't the end goal. There is so much more than just get married. Yes, if you want to get married and you want to have kids, that's great. But I'm not sitting there telling my boys that they have to get married. It'd be nice, but a lot of people choose not to now. There are less people getting married than there were before, but sadly, there are
Mm.
also more divorces than there ever were before.
Yeah, true. I've got two girls, and already, you know, from this age, they're quite young. I've said, "You don't need to get married." When they talk about and they see relationships, I'm like, "Yeah, that's an option. It's an option. It's not a you have to do this when you're older, when you're at the right age." I think everyone, if we can encourage choices and it's okay to be different and not follow that set path. I think when we were younger, it was very much these are the steps that you have to take to be happy. Well, actually, no, there's lots of different ways to be happy, and I think our thoughts are aligned with that. Hence, the how round is your roti? We're not just roti making machines. We've got a lot more to us, a lot more different things that we can be, and often we need to lean into that. And yeah, that a marriage relationship isn't the only important relationship in our life. We have to work on nurturing all the different relationships that we've got as well. So now that you're a relationship and divorce mentor coach, what do people come to you with, or how do you try and support them?
So what I found is when I was on my journey, I had great friends and they were supportive, but they didn't get it because none of them were divorced. My mum and dad emotionally weren't really they didn't really understand. And I don't blame them, because I feel it's just the cultural condition that, the way they've been brought up. And so and I had your legal team or whatever, but there was a space where I felt I just need somebody who understands my emotions to help me make better decisions, informed decisions. And I would go to my lawyers with like really ridiculous requests to write letters to my ex about things that played no part in the financial hearing. And obviously they do it. And I'd get charged a hell of a lot of money. And so I feel like if there's somebody that can, when there's an incident or there's an argument or something erupts in the house or something, then people can go to somebody and have a sounding board who knows, like, actually, it's okay, talk to them and talk them through that scenario so they don't overreact. Because so many parents, and I say parents, are scared that they're going to lose their children. And that fear overtakes so heavily that you are not rational when stuff is going on. I was not rational at all. So I feel like there's a gap of that emotional support in when you're in your journey. And that's what I do. Like, I'm not legally qualified, so I don't give legal advice, but I will help them see things from a different angle. I have a lot of women come to me that are divorced and they're lost afterwards and how to refine themselves. I have women that come to me in their 40s and 50s, and a lot of them are menopausal and can't manage their emotions and not sure if they even want a divorce or not. 9 times out of 10, they don't actually need a divorce. They've changed. So that's really interesting, because I'll say the question, right, there's like, oh, my husband's this and whatever. And I'll be like, so what's he doing differently that he did 10 years ago? And they're like, nothing. I said, so why all of a sudden is that getting on your nerves? They're like, I don't know. I said, because you've changed. Your hormones are changing. So how you process something 10 years ago is different now. So then when they go back and think, actually, I'm the one that's changing. Bichara man is doing the same thing he's done for the last 10 years. And he wakes up one morning and he's done the same thing, and he gets someone like jumping down his throat. And he's like, I didn't do anything. It's true though. It happens. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm going to keep that in mind.
he's standing there going, what did I do? Right? And he hasn't. It's because we're changing. And so when I speak to women about that, they think, actually, yeah, you're right. Like, actually, he hasn't changed. I've changed. So it depends how you want to manage that. A lot of people get divorced through menopause. And then some people come out the other side and think, why did I do that? So the other thing with that is it's educating women on how their stuff. And there is so much more about menopause these days. So that's great.
Yeah.
But it's also educating the family, like the man, the kids, on what a woman is going through. Because when I blow my top off, I'll be like to kids, menopausal. And they just, here she goes again. But we need to have those conversations with them. And then
Definitely.
sadly, I get lots of phone calls from women who financially are tied in. And that's hard, because if they're not working, they're financially tied in and they want to get out. Because say they get out, but then they're beholden to him for finances, he still has control. So it defeats the object in my head, right? You'll get out, but then he'll turn around tomorrow and say, well, I'm not going to give you any more money, or, So for me, financial independence is key as well. And that's why I did what I did. But it's not always possible for everybody. You've got so many people here from India on visas and other things. And that's hard. That's quite hard. And some of them end up going back to India because they can't free themselves over here, and they can't.
Yeah, that's
It's
hard.
tough.
I think the financial reasons, and the reason I think we just need, like you said, more education, more discussions about women, about marriage, about what it means and what they're going into, and never losing that financial independence, or at least going in. I was having a conversation with my husband a few weeks ago, and it's like going in with your eyes open, being aware, and even, when things change in a marriage. So say you buy a house, you have a kid. I was working in a corporate, I had a whole corporate career. And when I had my second daughter, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to finish work and then pick up a kid at 3:30 and how to manage it and still work 5 days a week. So we made the decision that I would stop working. It didn't mean I was any less ambitious. I started the business, but financially, my situation changed. So we had to have a discussion. Okay, what does that mean for us? I think for a woman, when she goes through that, we need to think about it really deeply. So what do I have under my name? What are my savings? What is my security that if this doesn't work, at one point it might be absolutely fine. You don't imagine the worst case scenario all the time. But I think that's where women need to get a bit more savvy and think realistically, what have I got if the worst was to happen, if we became separated? How would I remove myself? And I think just by having these conversation, it might be a prompt to some women to say, actually, what is my situation? What can I do if it was to happen? Um,
The problem with, I mean, I wish I thought like that and I didn't. I never thought I'd get married to get divorced. Like, it didn't even cross my mind. You don't go into marriage thinking, oh, it might end in divorce. But now people are thinking like that. There is a change in the way people process things. But that's, as much as it's great people are thinking that, it's also sad.
yeah.
It's also really sad that you go into marriage thinking, well, what happens if I get divorced? You know? And
I, I like I like to think of it as practical.
yeah, I know. See, I'm a proper romantic, right? And I remember I was in hospital at one point, not last year, but a few years ago when COVID had just come out and I didn't even know I had COVID, but I think I did. And my friend came to see me and she's like, and this is in the throes of the divorce. And she said, Sonia, out of all my friends were the least ambitious. And she doesn't mean that in a negative way. She went, the least ambitious, you just wanted to get married, have your 2.4 children and settle down. And she's right. I had this complete romanticized, idyllic picture in my head. And I got the polar opposite. The polar opposite. Not even like a little bit. I went through the most awful divorce. And yeah, yeah. But
But I think that's what we're sold. That's what, as young people, we see in the movies, we see in the Bollywood films. Meet your husband, happily ever after, have your kids. Oh, it appears so easy, but marriage is not easy. And I don't think, maybe it's mothers having more conversations with their daughters about, the practicalities, the realities of marriage. That, okay, if you both want to work, what's that going to look like? When you have kids, what's that going to look like for your career? Even down to choosing a career that will give you that flexibility. I never had any of that. Even I chose banking, and banking was you work hard, you work long hours, you get the job done. You've got to do all this extra stuff as well. There's no leaving at 5 o'clock if your job's not done. Often would stay extra, got client meetings. And I was like, this actually didn't work so well. I actually couldn't see a way of making that happen. And I think companies are changing. Things have changed in some areas from that. But I think maybe we need to have more of those conversations.
and I also think you said mothers have the daughters, and sons.
And sons, yeah, of
Sons. I
course.
have really open conversation with both my boys. And it's nice to see that even though didn't have, there was no love in my marriage. Like, they never witnessed any romance or anything in my married life. They did see it with my mum and dad, but my son, when he's had a girlfriend, I think he's the proper gentleman. And that's really nice to know that he knows the right way to do things and that it hasn't scared him or he doesn't know how to be. So that's quite nice. But that's because I have really open, honest conversations with them and I will tell them how it is. Like, I don't mince my words with them. I
Yeah, I
literally,
can believe that.
yeah, I literally say, like, you ever mess a woman around, and I said, I will have you. Don't even think about it. And I think mums need to have those, yeah, because if irrelevant, he's my son, that's fine, but he needs to be respectful and he needs to have those boundaries. And we, as parents, need to instill those in our kids.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So when is your book coming out?
So I reckon it'll actually be out by mid-March, but I'm saying April. Just my book launch in India is in April. Then I have a book launch in the UK in June. But I think it'll be available by the end of March at the latest.
Okay, brilliant. So for anyone who wants to, I will add some details onto the show notes as well of your website, because I'm sure you've got the wait list and more
Yeah.
information on there. Sonia, thank you so much. I think it's such a big topic to discuss, and it's really interesting hearing your story, how you've changed perceptions in South Asian culture, how, you celebrated something that usually is kept undercover, kept quiet, don't talk about it too much. And actually you've embraced it and you said, no, this has changed who I am. and we need to have these discussions and help people that are going through it. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for having me.